I found out my marriage was over at 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, standing in my own kitchen, holding a pan of lasagna I'd spent 3 hours making. Richard's favorite, the one with 4 cheeses and the homemade bechamel sauce that makes my wrists ache from all the stirring. He walked in wearing his new grey suit, the one I picked out for him at Dillard's 2 weeks ago, and he didn't even look at the lasagna. He looked at me like I was a piece of furniture he'd finally decided to replace. I got the promotion, he said. I smiled. 28 years of smiling at his achievements. 28 years of being the woman behind the man, the one who typed his first resume on a borrowed typewriter in 1996, the one who sold her grandmother's silver bracelet to pay for his MBA application fees. Richard, that's wonderful. I knew you'd— I'm leaving you. The pen didn't fall. I wish it had. That would have been dramatic, cinematic, something worth remembering. Instead, I just stood there, holding my 4-cheese lasagna, while my husband of 28 years explained that he needed to start fresh, and that I was no longer compatible with his future. Compatible, like I was software. Was the company's relocating me to the Denver office, he said, loosening his tie. I leave in 3 weeks. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll get the Camry and whatever's in the joint checking account. I'm keeping the house. The house, I repeated. My voice sounded strange, flat, like it belonged to someone else. It's in my name, Olivia. Always has been. That wasn't true. I remembered signing papers in 2003. I remembered the notary with the coffee breath. I remembered I had some adjustments made to the paperwork a few years ago, Richard said, as if reading my thoughts. For tax purposes. You signed them, don't you remember? I didn't remember. But Richard had always handled the finances. Richard had always handled everything. Where am I supposed to go? He shrugged. Actually shrugged. You have a sister, Helena, my younger sister, who'd been living in our guest house for 8 years, temporarily, while she got back on her feet after her second divorce. Helena, who borrowed $4,000 from me in 2019 and never mentioned it again. Helena, who always laughed a little too hard at Richard's jokes and touched his arm when she talked to him. I'm sure Helena will help you figure something out, Richard said, and then he smiled, a small, cold smile that I'd never seen before. Or maybe I'd seen it 1,000 times and never let myself recognize it. The lasagna was getting cold in my hands. I slept in the guest room that night. Our guest room, in our house, which was apparently no longer ours. Richard went to bed at his usual time, 10:30, and I heard him set his alarm for 5:45, like always, like nothing had changed. I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed I'd made up with fresh sheets just that morning because Helena had complained the old ones were scratchy, and I tried to remember the last time Richard had touched me with affection. Not politeness, not habit, affection. I couldn't. At 3 a.m. I went downstairs to throw away the lasagna. It was sitting on the counter where I'd left it, congealed and cold. I scraped it into the trash, and that's when I saw it. The card. It was sticking out from under a pizza box, half covered in coffee grounds. A homemade card, construction paper and glitter glue with my handwriting on the front. Happy 30th birthday to my forever love. I'd made that card in 1999, 25 years ago. I'd spent a whole afternoon on it while Marcus napped, cutting out little hearts, writing a poem inside that I'd been too embarrassed to read out loud. I'd given it to Richard at dinner, and he'd smiled and said thank you and set it aside to open later. He never opened it. 25 years, and the card was still sealed. The glitter glue had dried into hard little bumps. The construction paper had faded from red to a dusty pink, and now it was in the trash, thrown away with the junk mail and the coffee grounds and the remains of my marriage. I sat on the kitchen floor and I didn't cry. I was too empty to cry. The next morning, Helena found me packing a suitcase. So he told you, she said from the doorway. Not a question. I looked at her. My little sister. We had the same nose, the same hands. Our mother used to say we could be twins if I wasn't 4 years older. But Helena's hands were soft and manicured, while mine had calluses from 30 years of housework and gardening and taking care of everyone but myself. You knew, I said. Helena leaned against the doorframe. He mentioned it a few weeks ago. Asked me to help him find an apartment in Denver. A nice one, he said, for a fresh start. But you didn't tell me. It wasn't my place, Olivia. He's your husband. Not anymore, I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. I just kept packing. Where will you go? Helena asked. She didn't offer her own apartment. The guest house that I'd furnished, that I'd stocked with groceries every week, that I'd paid the utilities on because Helena was always between jobs. Tucson, I said. Barbara said I could stay with her for a while. Barbara Chen, my college roommate, the only friend I had left who wasn't somehow connected to Richard. Helena nodded slowly. That's probably for the best. Give everyone some space. Space. Like I was the problem. Like I was the one who needed to leave to make things easier. I zipped my suitcase and looked around the bedroom. Our bedroom. The bed where I'd slept for 23 years. The dresser that had belonged to Richard's mother. The photo on the nightstand of Marcus at his college graduation, shaking his father's hand while I stood slightly behind them, cropped almost out of the frame. The Prato, I said suddenly. What? My mother's porcelain plate. The blue one with the flowers. Where is it? Helena's expression flickered. Just for a second, but I saw it. I don't know what you're talking about. It was in the china cabinet, in the dining room. It's been there for 15 years, Helena, since Mama died. My sister shrugged. Maybe Richard moved it. You know how he is about clutter. I walked past her, down the stairs to the dining room. The china cabinet was there, full of crystal glasses and serving platters I'd collected over the years. But the shelf where my mother's plate had always sat, the plate she'd brought from Brazil when she immigrated in 1962, the plate she'd eaten her last meal on before she died in my arms, was empty. It's gone, I said. Helena was behind me. I could smell her perfume, the expensive one that Richard gave her last Christmas, the same one he said was too much when I asked for it. Things get lost, Olivia. You're being dramatic. I turned to look at my sister. She wasn't wearing the plate like a trophy. She wasn't that stupid, but she knew where it was. I could see it in her eyes. What else, Helena? What do you mean? What else did you help him take from me? She didn't answer. She just smiled, that same small, cold smile smile I'd seen on Richard's face the night before, and walked away. I drove to Tucson that afternoon. 4 hours of desert highway, saguaros standing like witnesses on either side of the road. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I just drove. Barbara's apartment was small and smelled like her dog, an overweight beagle named Professor. She'd made up the couch with clean sheets and put flowers on the coffee table. Grocery store carnations, the cheap kind, but she'd arranged them nicely in a mason jar. Stay as long as you need, she said, hugging me at the door. I mean it, Liv, as long as you need. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The couch was comfortable enough, but the apartment was full of strange sounds. The refrigerator humming, Professor snoring in the bedroom, the neighbor upstairs walking around at 2 a.m. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I'd done wrong. 28 years. I'd given Richard 28 years. I'd raised his son. I'd hosted his dinner parties. I'd smiled at his colleagues and laughed at his jokes and pretended not to notice when he came home late smelling like someone else's perfume. I'd noticed. I'd always noticed. I just never said anything because saying something meant losing everything. And now I'd lost everything anyway. On the third night, my phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Olivia Begay? A man's voice. Deep, calm, professional. Who is this? My name is Edward Nez. I was married to Richard's sister, Margaret, before she passed. Margaret. I remembered her. A quiet woman with sad eyes who died of cancer 6 years ago. Richard had cried at her funeral, one of the only times I'd ever seen him show emotion. I remember you, I said, from the funeral. I'm sorry, but why are you? I need to meet with you, in person, tomorrow, if possible. I'm in Tucson. I know where you are. I can drive there. This is important, Mrs. Begay. It's late, Mr. Nez, and I'm not really in a position to. He said you'd never open the drawer. I stopped breathing. What did you say? Richard. He said you'd never be brave enough to open the drawer in his study, the locked one. He said you were too trusting, too stupid, were his exact words. Edward Nez paused. I don't think you're stupid, Mrs. Begay. I think you've just been kept in the dark for a very long time. My heart was pounding. The drawer. Richard's study had a desk with a locked drawer. I'd asked about it once, years ago, and he'd said it was just old tax documents. Nothing important. Nothing I needed to worry about. I'd believed him. What's in the drawer, Mr. Nez? That's what I need to tell you. In person, not over the phone. I gripped the phone tighter. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights sweeping across the ceiling. Tomorrow, I said. 10 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Thank you. And Mrs. Begay? Yes? Don't tell Richard you spoke to me. Don't tell anyone. If he finds out I contacted you. He paused again. Just don't tell him. He hung up. I sat there in the dark for a long time, holding my phone like a grenade. The drawer. 28 years. And I'd never once tried to open it. Never once questioned what Richard was hiding. Never once demanded answers. Too trusting. Too stupid. But not anymore. Edward Nez arrived at Barbara's apartment at exactly 10 o'clock. He drove a dusty pickup truck, the kind you see all over Arizona, and he was wearing a denim jacket despite the heat. When I opened the door, he didn't smile. He just nodded, like we were about to discuss something serious, which I suppose we were. Thank you for seeing me, he said. Barbara had left for work an hour earlier. Professor was asleep in his bed, snoring softly. I'd made coffee, the cheap kind, all Barbara had, and set out 2 mugs on the kitchen table. You said Richard talked about a drawer, I said, not bothering with small talk. What drawer? What's in it? Edward sat down heavily. He was a big man, maybe 6'2", with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes. He looked tired, not sleepy tired, life tired. Before I show you what I have, he said, I need you to understand something. Margaret, my wife, she knew things about Richard, things she never told anyone while she was alive. But before she died, she gave me a box, told me to keep it safe, told me that someday someone would need what was inside. And you think that someone is me. I know it is. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope worn at the edges. Margaret was Richard's oldest sister. She practically raised him after their parents died. She knew all his secrets, including the ones he's been hiding from you for 26 years. 26 years. Marcus was 27. Whatever this was, it started before my son was even a year old. Edward slid the envelope across the table. Open it. My hands were shaking. Told myself it was the coffee, but it wasn't. I undid the clasp and tilted the envelope. 3 items fell out. A photograph, a folded piece of paper, and a small gold earring. The earring I recognized immediately. It was one of a pair I'd bought for myself in 1998, a little splurge after Marcus was born. I'd lost one of them, or thought I had, about a month after I bought them. Richard said it probably fell behind the dresser. I never found it. Where did you get this? I whispered. Margaret found it in Richard's car in 1998, along with these. I picked up the photograph. It showed a woman I didn't recognize. Young, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and a round face. She was holding a baby. The baby was wrapped in a blue blanket, and he was looking at the camera with wide, dark eyes. Who is this? Her name is Rosa Whitehorse. She worked as a housekeeper for Richard's company back in the late 90s. Cleaned the offices, that sort of thing. Edward paused. The baby's name is Daniel. He was born in March of 1998. March of 1998. Marcus was born in October of 1997, which meant Richard was sleeping with her while I was pregnant, I said. My voice sounded far away. Yes. And the baby is Richard's son. Margaret had a DNA test done. She paid for it herself without telling Richard. She wanted proof before she confronted him. Did she confront him? Edward shook his head slowly. She was going to. But then she got sick, and by the time she realized how bad it was, she didn't have the strength anymore. So she gave me the box and made me promise to wait. She said the truth would come out when it needed to. I stared at the photograph. The baby, Daniel, had Richard's nose. The same slightly crooked bridge. The same flared nostrils. How had I never seen it? Because you weren't looking? A voice in my head said. Because you didn't want to see. I unfolded the piece of paper. It was a bank statement dated January 2024. Richard's name was at the top, but the account number wasn't one I recognized. And there, highlighted in yellow, was a recurring transfer. $180 per month sent to an account belonging to Rosa M. Whitehorse. He's been paying her, I said, every month for 26 6 years. Margaret tracked it for as long as she could. The total is somewhere around $560,000. $560,000. Enough to pay off a house, enough to fund a retirement, enough to change a life. That money, I said slowly, came from our joint account. Some of it, Richard's been creative about hiding the transfers. Shell accounts, cash withdrawals, business expenses that don't exist. Your sister helped him set up some of the paperwork. I looked up sharply. Helena? She's been managing one of the Shell accounts for about 8 years now. Gets a small cut every month for her trouble. Around $300. $300 a month for 8 years. That was almost $29,000 my sister had taken from me, from my family, to help my husband hide his bastard child. The room felt very small suddenly, very hot. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why now? Edward leaned back in his chair. Because Richard's not just leaving you, Mrs. Begay. He's planning to bring Daniel into the family, officially. He's going to acknowledge him as his son, introduce him to Marcus, maybe even add him to the will, and when that happens, you'll have nothing. No house, no savings, no share of anything Richard built while you were married, because legally you were never really his partner. You were just a placeholder, I finished. His words, not mine. I sat there for a long moment, looking at the photograph of Rosa Whitehorse and her son, my husband's son, the brother my Marcus didn't know he had. Does Daniel know? I asked. About Richard? Rosa told him his father died before he was born. She's been cashing the checks and telling him it's life insurance money, some kind of trust fund. The boy has no idea. And Rosa, does she know Richard's planning to? She knows. She's been pushing for it. Apparently she's tired of being a secret. Edward's voice was flat, without judgment. She wants Daniel to have what she thinks he deserves. A name, an inheritance, a father. All the things Richard had promised me 30 years ago. A name, a family, a future. And now he was going to give them to someone else's son while throwing me out like garbage. I gathered the items and put them back in the envelope. The earring clinked against the table. You said Margaret told you to wait until the truth needed to come out, I said. What made you decide now was the time? Edward was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket again and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through it, found what he was looking for, and turned the screen toward me. It was a photograph, recent, judging by the date stamp, just 3 days ago. Richard and Helena standing in what looked like a lawyer's office. Richard was signing something. Helena was watching, that same small smile on her face. This was taken at Richard's attorney's office, Edward said. My nephew works there as a paralegal. He sent me this. What was Richard signing? New paperwork for the house, removing your name entirely and adding Helena as co-owner. The words hit me like a physical blow. Helena, my own sister, not just helping Richard hide money, taking my home. She's been planning this with him, I said. It wasn't a question. For at least 2 years, according to my nephew. They've been waiting for the right moment. Richard's promotion gave them the excuse they needed. I thought about Helena's smile when Richard announced he was leaving me. The way she'd said, it wasn't my place, to warn me. The missing porcelain plate from my mother, probably already hanging in whatever apartment Helena was planning to move into. The guest house, I said suddenly. The one Helena's been living in. That's on the property too. It's part of the main deed. Which means if Helena becomes co-owner, she gets the guest house and the main house and everything inside. Edward nodded slowly. I stood up from the table. My legs felt weak, but I made them hold me. Thank you, Mr. Nez, for telling me this. I know it couldn't have been easy. What are you going to do? I looked at the envelope in my hands. 26 years of lies, $500,000 stolen, my own sister conspiring against me, and somewhere out there, a 26-year-old man who didn't know his whole life was built on secrets. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I'm not going to let them win. Edward stood too. At the door, he paused. Margaret always liked you, he said. She told me once that you were the best thing that ever happened to Richard. Too good for him, she said. Turns out she was right. After he left, I sat back down at the kitchen table and spread out the contents of the envelope, the photograph, the bank statement, my lost earring found in my husband's car 26 years ago. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Helena's number. My finger hovered over the call button. No, not yet. Helena didn't know that I knew, and for now I wanted to keep it that way. I thought about Marcus, my son, who hadn't called me since I left Phoenix, who'd chosen his father's side without even hearing mine. Did he know about Daniel? Did he know about Helena's betrayal? Did he know anything at all about the man he called Dad? I looked at the photograph again. Daniel was a baby in this picture, but he'd be a grown man now, 26 years old, almost the same age as Marcus. They could pass for brothers, because they were brothers. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. The blue dress you made for Sarah's wedding. Helena wore it last night to dinner with Richard. I thought you should know. I stared at the message. Sarah was Marcus's wife. I spent 3 months making that dress for their wedding in 2019. Hand-stitched beading, custom alterations, everything. Helena had borrowed it once and never returned it. I'd assumed it was in her closet, forgotten, but she was wearing it to dinner with my husband. I put the phone down carefully. My hands weren't shaking anymore. 28 years of being too trusting, too stupid, too afraid to see what was right in front of me. That woman was gone now. That night, I dreamed about my mother's porcelain plate. It was hanging on a wall I didn't recognize, in a house that smelled like Helena's perfume. I reached for it, but every time I got close, it moved further away. I woke up at 4 a.m. sweating, with one thought burning in my mind. I needed to get back into that house. I needed to see what else they'd taken. I needed to find the drawer. Barbara's landlord gave us 2 weeks' notice on a Thursday morning. Something about a nephew moving to Tucson, needing the apartment, lease violations, blah blah blah. Barbara tried to fight it, but the truth was she'd been letting me stay without adding me to the lease, and technically that was a problem. I'm so sorry, Liv, she said, tears in her eyes. I didn't think he'd find out. I hugged her and told her it wasn't her fault, because it wasn't. It was mine, for being 52 years old with nowhere to go and no money to get there. The joint checking account, the one Richard said I could have, turned out to contain exactly $3,200, not the $220,000 I thought was in there. When I called the bank, a very polite young man explained that there had been authorized transfers over the past 6 months, moving funds funds to other accounts. Authorized by whom? By both account holders, ma'am. The signatures matched. I hadn't signed anything, but apparently, according to the bank's records, I had. That night, I sat in Barbara's living room and did the math. $3,200 minus first and last month's rent on even the cheapest apartment in Tucson meant I'd have maybe $400 left over. That was groceries for a month if I was careful. Gas for 2 weeks. Nothing for utilities, nothing for emergencies, nothing for the medication I needed for my blood pressure. I thought about calling Marcus, my son, who hadn't spoken to me in 3 weeks, who'd sent me one text after I left Phoenix. Dad says you're being dramatic. Give him space. Give him space. Like I was the one who'd thrown away 28 years of marriage for a promotion and a fresh start. But I was desperate, so I swallowed my pride and called anyway. He answered on the 4th ring. Mom, I'm busy. Marcus, I need help. Barbara's apartment. I have to leave and I don't have anywhere to go. I was hoping maybe I could stay with you and Sarah for a few. That's not a good idea. Just for a week or two until I figure something out. I'll sleep on the couch. I won't be any trouble. Mom. His voice was cold. The same coldness I'd heard in his father's voice the night Richard told me he was leaving. Dad explained everything. You've been difficult for years. He's been patient, but you pushed him too far. I think you need to take some time and really think about your choices. My choices, like choosing to raise him, choosing to stay home when Richard wanted a wife who didn't work, choosing to give up my teaching career so Marcus could have a mother who was always there. What did he tell you? I asked quietly. It doesn't matter. The point is, Sarah and I can't have that kind of energy in our house, especially not with Ethan. Ethan, my grandson, 6 years old, with his father's smile and his grandmother's stubborn streak. The last time I'd seen him was a month ago at his school play. I'd driven 2 hours to watch him be a tree in the kindergarten production of The Four Seasons. He'd waved at me from the stage, so proud of his paper leaves. Marcus, please, I just need a few days. I said no, Mom. A pause. Look, there's a birthday party for Ethan on Saturday at Chuck E. Cheese, 2 o'clock. If you want to come and see him, that's fine, but don't make it weird. Don't bring your drama. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, trying to remember when my son had become this person, this cold, dismissive stranger who talked to his mother like she was an inconvenience. Richard had done this. 27 years of poison dripped slowly into Marcus's ear. Daddy's little helper, Daddy's favorite, Daddy's boy. And now I was alone. Went to the birthday party. I shouldn't have, but I went anyway, because Ethan was my grandson and I loved him, and I wasn't going to let Richard take that away from me too. The Chuck E. Cheese was loud and bright and smelled like pizza grease and desperation. I found Marcus and Sarah near the back, watching Ethan run around with a pack of other screaming children. Sarah saw me first. She didn't smile. Olivia, not Mom, not even Mrs. Begay, just my name, flat and unwelcoming. I brought a present, I said, holding up the wrapped package. A remote-controlled dinosaur I'd found at Walmart. It had taken most of my remaining cash, but Ethan loved dinosaurs. Sarah took the package without looking at it. You can put it with the others. I walked to the table, piled with gifts, all of them bigger and shinier than mine. There was a bicycle with a bow on it, a gaming console in a branded bag, a huge stuffed animal that probably cost more than my car payment used to be. When I turned around, Marcus was standing behind me. You came. You said I could. I said it would be fine, not that it was a good idea. I looked at my son. He was wearing a polo shirt with a little logo on it, the kind Richard always wore. His hair was combed the same way Richard combed his. When had Marcus become a copy of his father? I just want to see Ethan, I said. Then see him, but don't. He stopped, looked past me. His face changed. I turned to see what he was looking at. Helena, my sister, was walking toward us, holding a gift bag in one hand and a bouquet of balloons in the other. She was wearing a dress I didn't recognize. New, expensive, the kind of thing Richard used to buy for me when he wanted something. And behind her, adjusting his cuffs like he was walking into a board meeting, was Richard. What is he doing here? I asked Marcus. He's Ethan's grandfather. He's the man who threw me out of my house 3 weeks ago. Marcus's jaw tightened. Don't start, Mom. Not here. Helena reached us first. Helena, she smiled at me, that same cold, small smile, and air kissed my cheek without actually touching me. Olivia, I didn't expect to see you here. You look tired. I didn't respond. I was watching Richard, who was shaking hands with Marcus like they were business partners closing a deal. Good to see you, son. How's the market? Up 3% this quarter. I'll send you the report. They talked like I wasn't there, like I was invisible, a ghost at my own grandson's birthday party. Then Ethan came running up, sweaty and happy, and my heart broke a little more. Grandma, Olivia! He threw his arms around my legs. Did you see me on the climbing thing? I went all the way to the top. I saw, sweetheart. You were so brave. Richard crouched down to Ethan's level. Hey, sport. Grandpa brought you something special. Want to see? Ethan's attention shifted immediately. He ran to Richard, who produced a small box from his jacket. Inside was a watch, a real watch, silver and gleaming, far too expensive for a 6-year-old. Wow. Ethan's eyes went wide. That's a big boy watch, Richard said, for my favorite big boy. I watched my grandson hug my husband, my ex-husband. I had to remember that now, and I felt something inside me go quiet, not numb, quiet, like the moment before a storm. Helena appeared at my elbow. It's sweet, isn't it? Richard's always been so good with children. It's a shame you couldn't give him more. I turned to look at her. My little sister, who I'd taught to ride a bike, who I'd held while she cried through her first divorce, and her second and her third. My sister, who was wearing my mother's earrings, the ones that matched the porcelain plate, the ones I'd been looking for since Mama died. Those are Mama's earrings, I said. Helena touched her ear, almost reflexively. These? No, I bought these. They have the little chip on the left one, from when you dropped them at her funeral. Her smile flickered, just for a second. You're confused, Olivia. You've been under a lot of stress. I wasn't confused. I knew those earrings like I knew my own hands, and I knew my sister well enough to see the lie in her eyes. But before I could say anything else, Sarah appeared with Ethan. Time for cake, she announced. Ethan, go wash your hands. As Ethan ran off, Sarah turned to me. Her expression was polite but firm. Olivia, I think it's best better if you go. What? It's causing tension. For Ethan's sake. She glanced at Marcus, who nodded. We want this to be a happy day. I looked at my son. Marcus. She's right, Mum. This isn't the place. I'm his grandmother. And Dad's his grandfather. And you two can't be in the same room without making it awkward. So one of you has to go. And Dad. He trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Dad was staying. Dad was always staying. I picked up my purse. My hands were steady, even though everything inside me was shaking. The dinosaur, I said. Make sure he knows it's from me. I walked out of that Chuck E. Cheese with my head up and my eyes dry. I made it all the way to my car, Barbara's car, borrowed because I didn't even have that anymore, before I let myself cry. That night, I found a motel on the outskirts of Tucson. $49 a night, cash only, no questions asked. The sheet smelled like bleach, and the air conditioner rattled like it was dying, but it was a roof over my head. I had exactly $847 left. I lay on the bed and stared at the water stain on the ceiling, shaped vaguely like a heart. Somewhere in Phoenix, my husband was sleeping in our bed. My sister was probably in the guest house, wearing my mother's earrings, dreaming of the day she'd move into the main house as co-owner, and I was here, alone, with nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Edward. I did some digging. The signature on the house transfer documents from 2021. It's not yours. I found the notary. She's willing to talk. I sat up slowly. What do you mean it's not mine? I mean someone forged it. Whoever signed those papers, it wasn't you, and I can prove it. I stared at the screen for a long time. 3 years ago, Richard had removed my name from the deed of the house I'd lived in for 23 years. He'd forged my signature, or paid someone to do it. He'd stolen my home out from under me, and I'd never even known, until now. My phone buzzed again. The notary wants to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. She's scared of Richard. She says he threatened her, but she kept copies of everything. I typed back. Where? Phoenix. At a coffee shop near downtown. I'll send you the address. Phoenix. Back to the city, where my whole life had fallen apart. Back to where Richard and Helena were probably celebrating their victory over me. I looked at my remaining money. $847. A tank of gas to Phoenix would cost about $60. The motel for another night would be $49. That would leave me with... It didn't matter. I had to go. Because if that signature was forged, then the house transfer was fraud. And if the house transfer was fraud, then Richard hadn't just betrayed me. He committed a crime, and I was going to make sure he paid for it. The coffee shop was called Desert Bloom, a small place tucked between a laundromat and a nail salon in a strip mall I'd driven past 100 times without noticing. Edward was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a woman I didn't recognize. She was maybe 60, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and glasses that made her eyes look too big for her face. She was clutching a manila folder like it might fly away if she let go. Mrs. Begay, Edward said, standing. This is Patricia Redhorse. She was the notary on the 2021 transfer documents. Patricia didn't stand. She didn't even look at me. She was staring at the folder in her hands, her knuckles white. I shouldn't be here, she said. If he finds out, he won't find out, Edward said gently. I promised you that. I sat down across from her. Up close, I could see the lines of worry etched deep into her face. This woman was afraid. Genuinely, deeply afraid. Mrs. Redhorse, I said quietly. What happened? She was silent for a long moment. Then she opened the folder and slid it across the table to me. Inside were copies of documents I'd never seen before. The deed transfer from 2021, removing my name from the house. A power of attorney form dated 2019, supposedly giving Richard control over all my financial decisions. Bank authorization forms, investment account changes, insurance policy modifications. All of them with my signature at the bottom. All of them forged. I knew something was wrong, Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. The signatures didn't look right. Too smooth, too practiced. Real signatures have little variations. These were perfect. Too perfect. Why didn't you report it? She laughed bitterly. Report it to who? Mr. Yazzie is a powerful man. He knows people, lawyers, judges, police officers. When I told him I had concerns, he came to my office personally. She paused, swallowing hard. He said if I ever talked about this, he'd make sure I lost my license. Then he said he knew where my daughter lived, where my grandchildren went to school. My stomach turned. Richard, my Richard, the man I'd slept next to for 28 years, threatening a woman's grandchildren. But was he really my Richard anymore? Had he ever been? Why are you talking now? I asked. Patricia looked at Edward, then back at me. Because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months, and that was 4 months ago. She touched the folder with trembling fingers. I kept copies of everything. I knew someday someone would need them. And now you want to make it right? I finished. I want to be able to face God with a clear conscience. She pushed the folder closer to me. Take it. All of it. These are certified copies. They'll hold up in court. I looked at the stack of papers. 28 years of my life, reduced to forged signatures and stolen assets. My home, my savings, my security, all of it taken while I smiled and cooked dinner and believed the man I loved would never hurt me. There's more, Edward said. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another envelope. This one was thicker, heavier. He set it on the table between us. After Margaret died, I went through her things. She'd been collecting information on Richard for years, things she never told anyone. He opened the envelope and spread the contents on the table. The drawer in Richard's study, Margaret had a key made years ago. She photographed everything inside. I stared at the photographs, documents, letters, receipts, and in the center of the spread, a single image that made my heart stop. It was a photograph of a boy, maybe 5 years old, standing in front of a Christmas tree. He had dark hair, dark eyes, and a smile that was achingly familiar, because it was the same smile I'd seen in Marcus's school photos. The same smile I'd watched grow from a baby's grin to a man's confident expression. Daniel, I said, Richard's other son. Edward pointed to another photograph, a letter, handwritten, dated 2015. Rosa wrote to Richard that year. She wanted more money. Said Daniel was asking questions about his father. She threatened to tell him the truth if Richard didn't increase the payments. What did Richard do? He doubled the monthly amount, from $900 to $1,800, and he made Rosa sign a confidentiality sympathy agreement. If she ever told Daniel who his father was, she'd have to pay back every cent she'd ever received. I did the math in my head. At yen $800 a month since 2015, plus the $900 before that. Richard had paid Rosa over $500,000 to keep his secret. $500,000 that should have been mine. That should have been Marcus's inheritance. Does Rosa still have that agreement? I asked. She does, and she's getting tired of it. Edward shuffled through more papers. I made contact with her last week. She's ready to talk. She's ready to tell Daniel the truth. Why now? Because Richard promised her that once he divorced you, he'd acknowledge Daniel publicly. Bring him into the family. Give him the Yazzie name. But now that the divorce is happening, Richard's been stalling, making excuses. Rosa thinks he's going to back out of the deal. I looked at all the evidence spread out before me. The forged signatures, the hidden son, the stolen money. 28 years of lies, laid bare on a coffee shop table. What do you want me to do with all this? I asked Edward. He leaned back in his chair. That's up to you. You could go to the police, file fraud charges, take Richard to court and expose everything. Or you could use it as leverage. You could make him give you what you deserve. The house, the savings, a fair settlement, without dragging it all through the courts. I thought about Marcus, my son, who still believed his father was a good man, who didn't know he had a brother, who would be devastated when the truth came out. If I go public with this, I said slowly, it will destroy Marcus. He worships Richard. Finding out his father is a liar and a thief, and that he has a brother Richard hid from him for 26 years. It will be hard, Edward agreed, but Marcus deserves to know the truth, don't you think? Did he? Marcus had chosen his father's side without hesitation. He'd thrown me out of his son's birthday party. He called me dramatic and difficult and refused to help me when I had nowhere to go. But he was still my son, and I still loved him, even when he didn't deserve it. I won't tell Marcus, I said finally. Not yet, not like this. And Patricia and Edward exchanged glances. What are you thinking? Edward asked. I gathered up the papers, the photographs, the evidence of Richard's betrayal. I put them back in the folders, stacked them neatly, held them against my chest. I'm thinking that Richard has spent 28 years controlling the narrative, telling everyone what to think about me, about our marriage, about our family. He's the hero of his own story, and I'm just the supporting character he decided to write out. I stood up from the table. I'm done being a character in Richard's story. It's time for him to be a character in mine. Edward raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means I'm going to give Richard exactly what he deserves, but I'm going to do it my way, on my timeline. I looked at Patricia. Thank you, Mrs. Redhorse, for your courage, for keeping these records. I promise you they won't go to waste. Patricia's eyes were wet. Make him pay, for all of us. I nodded once, then walked out of the coffee shop into the Phoenix sunshine. That night, I checked into a cheap motel near the airport and spread all the documents out on the bed. I read every page, studied every photograph, memorized every forged signature. Then I made a list. Things Richard had taken from me. My home, value, $485,000. My share of the joint accounts, approximately $180. 28 years of pension contributions he'd redirected, estimated $95. My mother's porcelain plate, priceless. My dignity, immeasurable. Things Richard had hidden from me. A son named Daniel, age 26. A mistress named Rosa, paid off for 26 years. Forged documents stealing my identity and asset. My sister's betrayal. Things Richard was about to lose. Everything. I picked up my phone and typed a message to a number I'd found in the document. A number that belonged to Rosa Whitehorse. My name is Olivia Begay. I'm Richard Yazzie's wife. I know about Daniel. I know about everything. And I think it's time we talked. I hit send and waited. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. How did you get this number? Rosa's voice was sharp, suspicious. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have documents that prove Richard has been lying to both of us for 26 years. Documents that could destroy him. Silence on the other end. I'm not going to destroy him, I continued. Not yet, but I need your help. And in exchange, I'm going to help you get what you want. What do you think I want? You want Daniel to know his father. You want Richard to acknowledge him publicly. You want the money and the name and the inheritance he's been promising you for years. I paused. I can make that happen, but only if we work together. More silence. Then, why would you help me? I'm the woman your husband cheated on you with. Because you're not my enemy, Rosa. Richard is, and he's been playing us against each other for 26 years without us even knowing it. I gripped the phone tighter. It's time we stopped letting him win. Another long pause. When Rosa spoke again, her voice was different, softer. When can we meet? Tomorrow. Noon. There's a diner on Mill Avenue called the Early Bird. I'll be in the back booth. How will I know it's you? I looked at the photograph of Daniel on the bed beside me. The photograph of the son my husband had hidden. The brother my Marcus didn't know existed. I'll be the woman who looks like she's about to burn down her entire life. I said, you won't miss me. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would meet my husband's mistress. Tomorrow I would set in motion a plan that would change everything. But tonight I let myself feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Cold, calculated, dangerous hope. Richard thought he'd won. He thought I was beaten, broken, finished. He had no idea what was coming. Rosa Whitehorse was not what I expected. I'd imagined someone younger, prettier, more glamorous. The kind of woman a man leaves his wife for. But Rosa was 53 years old, with grey streaks in her dark hair and worry lines around her mouth. She looked tired. She looked like me. We met at the Early Bird Diner as planned. She was already in the back booth when I arrived, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. You're her, she said as I sat down. The wife, for 28 years. I've seen pictures in Richard's office. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. You looked happy in them. I thought I was. I signaled the waitress for coffee. How long have you known? About me? From the beginning. Richard never lied to me about being married. He said you didn't understand him, that you were cold, distant, that the marriage was already over in everything but name. She laughed bitterly. The classics. And you believed him. I was 24 years old, cleaning offices for minimum wage. He was handsome, powerful, and he said he loved me. Of course I believed him. She met my eyes. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not going to apologize either. I did what I thought I had to do for my son, Daniel. He's a good boy. Man now, I guess, 26 years old. Works as a mechanic. Never went to college because Richard said he'd pay for it someday, and someday never came. The bitterness in her voice was sharp. He has no idea who his father is. I've been lying to him his whole life. Why? Because Richard made me sign that agreement, because I was afraid of losing everything, because she stopped, shook her head, because I was stupid and young, and I thought eventually he'd do the right thing. The waitress brought my coffee. I wrapped my hands around the cup, feeling its warmth. Richard promised to acknowledge Daniel publicly once the divorce went through, I said. But he's stalling. He's been stalling for 6 months. First, it was after the promotion. Then, after the holidays. Now it's after things settle down. Rosa's jaw tightened. I'm done waiting. Daniel deserves to know who his father is, and Richard deserves to face what he's done. I agree. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photographs. The forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the evidence of decades of fraud. This is what Richard has been hiding, not just from me, from everyone. If this comes out, he loses everything. His job, his reputation, maybe his freedom. Rosa stared at the screen. Where did you get this? It doesn't matter. What matters is what we do with it. I put the phone away. I have a plan, but I need your help. What kind of plan? Richard's hosting Thanksgiving dinner at the house next week. Our house, the one he stole from me. Helena will be there. Marcus will be there with his wife and son. It's going to be a big family celebration. And I'm going to crash it. I leaned forward. I want you to bring Daniel. I want Richard to have to look his hidden son in the face, in front of everyone. I want him to explain himself, to Marcus, to Daniel, to the whole family. Rosa was quiet for a long moment. That's a lot. It is, and I won't force you. But think about it. 26 years, Rosa. 26 years of lies, of hiding, of Daniel growing up without a father, while Richard played happy family with me and Marcus. Don't you want him to finally face the truth? She looked down at her coffee. Her hands were shaking slightly. Daniel's going to hate me, she said quietly. When he finds out I've been lying to him all these years, maybe. Or maybe he'll understand that you were trying to protect him, that you were in an impossible situation. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Either way, he deserves to know. And you deserve to stop living this lie. Rosa looked up at me. Her eyes were wet. Thanksgiving, she said. What time? The week before Thanksgiving passed in a blur of preparation. I found a cheap apartment in Phoenix, a studio, barely furnished, but mine. I used the last of my savings for the deposit and first month's rent. It left me with almost nothing, but I didn't care. I was done being homeless, done being powerless. Edward helped me prepare. We made copies of all the documents, stored them in multiple locations. If something went wrong, if Richard found out what we were planning, we wanted to make sure the evidence would survive. Are you sure about this? Edward asked me the night before Thanksgiving. We were sitting in my empty apartment, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked. Once you do this, there's no going back. I know. Marcus might never forgive you. He might not. I looked at the photograph of Daniel I'd pinned to my refrigerator. The son my husband had hidden. The brother my son didn't know he had. But he deserves to know the truth, even if it hurts. And if Richard retaliates, he will. He'll threaten me, try to destroy me, do everything he can to protect himself. I smiled grimly. But I have something he doesn't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. Thanksgiving Day was cold and grey, the kind of November weather that makes Phoenix feel almost like a real autumn. I dressed carefully, not fancy, but dignified. A dark dress I had bought at Goodwill, simple jewelry, comfortable shoes, clothes for a woman who was about to burn down her life. I drove to the house at 3 o'clock, an hour after dinner was supposed to start. I wanted them to be settled, comfortable, convinced that I wasn't coming. Rosa texted me when she arrived. We're parked down the street. Daniel's nervous. He doesn't know why we're here. Tell him he's about to meet his family. I texted back. I parked in the driveway, my driveway, the one I'd pulled into thousands of times over 23 years, and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I still had my key and it still worked. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing and pumpkin pie. The smell of 28 Thanksgivings, of family and tradition and everything Richard was about to lose. I found them in the dining room. Richard at the head of the table, of course. Helena on his right, wearing a dress I didn't recognize. Expensive, new, probably bought with my money. Marcus and Sarah across from her, with Ethan between them. And at the far end, alone, an empty chair. The chair that used to be mine. They all looked up when I walked in. Olivia? Richard's voice was ice. You weren't invited. I know. I walked to the empty chair and stood behind it, my hands resting on its back. But I have something to say, and I wanted to say it to everyone. Mom. Marcus stood up, his face tight with embarrassment. This isn't the time. Sit down, Marcus. Something in my voice made him obey. He sat. Everyone was staring at me now. Richard with fury, Helena with fear, Sarah with confusion, little Ethan with wide, curious eyes. 28 years ago, I married this man. I nodded toward Richard. I gave him everything. My career, my savings, my youth. I raised his son, kept his house, supported his ambitions. And do you know what he gave me in return? Olivia? Richard started. He gave me lies. I pulled out my phone, opened the photographs, forged signatures on documents that stole my home, secret bank accounts that funneled our money to people I'd never met, a quarter century of betrayal while I smiled and cooked his meals and believed he loved me. I set the phone on the table. Richard's face had gone pale. That's not, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I looked at Marcus. Your father has been paying child support for 26 years to a woman named Rosa Whitehorse for a son named Daniel. Marcus's face went slack. What? You have a brother, Marcus. A half-brother. He's 26 years old. He works as a mechanic and he's standing outside right now waiting to meet you. That's a lie. Richard was on his feet, his chair crashing backward. She's lying. She's always been. I'm not lying. I walked to the china cabinet and opened it. There on the top shelf was my mother's porcelain plate. Helena had moved it, but she hadn't thrown it away. I took it down carefully, held it in my hands. This plate belonged to my mother. She brought it from Brazil in 1962. It's the only thing I have left of her. I turned to look at Helena. You stole it from me, just like you helped Richard steal everything else. The house, the money, my marriage. You've been conspiring with him for years, taking what was mine piece by piece while I trusted you. Helena's face was white. Olivia, I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I looked at Richard. I want the truth. Tell Marcus about his brother. Tell him about Rosa. Tell him what kind of man his father really is. Richard's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape, looking for an ally. But Helena was frozen. Sarah was staring at him with dawning horror. And Marcus was looking at his father like he'd never seen him before. Dad? Marcus's voice was small. Is it true? Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. And then he did what he'd always done when cornered. He attacked. This is your fault, he snarled at me. All of this. If you'd been a better wife, if you'd given me what I needed, I wouldn't have had to what? Sleep with another woman? Father a child and hide him for 26 years? Forge my signature and steal my home? I laughed. No, Richard, this isn't my fault. This is yours. Every choice, every lie, every betrayal, that was all you. Richard lunged at me, not to hit me, to grab the phone, to destroy the evidence. But he was clumsy with rage, and his hand caught the edge of the table, sending dishes crashing. And then the porcelain plate, it slipped from my hands. Or maybe Richard knocked it, or maybe I let it go, somewhere deep in my subconscious, because I knew what it would mean. It shattered on the floor. 40 pieces, 50 pieces, too many to count. My mother's plate, the last piece of her I had, destroyed. The room went silent. I knelt down and picked up the largest piece. A fragment of blue flower, painted by hand 60 years ago in a country I'd never seen. You've taken everything from me, I said quietly. My home, my money, my family, my dignity, and now this. I stood up and looked at Richard. But you haven't taken my son. I turned to Marcus, who was staring at the broken plate with tears streaming down his face. Your father told you I was dramatic, difficult, cold. He told you our problems were my fault, and you believed him. I stepped closer to him. I don't blame you. He's very convincing. He convinced me too, for 28 years. Mom? Marcus's voice cracked. Go outside, meet your brother, talk to Rosa, and then when you know the whole truth, you can decide what kind of relationship you want with your father. I touched his cheek gently, and with me. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Helena start to cry. I heard Richard shouting something about lawyers and lies and how I'd regret this. I didn't look back. Outside, Rosa was standing by her car with a young man I'd never met. He had Richard's nose, Marcus's smile, and eyes full of questions. Daniel, I said, I'm Olivia. I was married to your father for 28 years. He stared at me. My father? Go inside. Your brother is waiting for you. I walked past them to my car, got in, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw Daniel walk toward the house. I saw the front door open, Marcus standing there, looking at the brother he'd never known he had, and then I turned the corner and left them all behind. I didn't go home that night. I drove to the desert, parked on the side of the road somewhere between Phoenix and nowhere, and watched the stars come out. My phone buzzed 17 times. I didn't answer. Some of the calls were from Marcus, some from numbers I didn't recognize. One from Helena, which made me laugh out loud in the darkness of my car. What could she possibly have to say to me now? Around midnight, Edward texted me. It's done. Marcus and Daniel talked for 3 hours. Richard locked himself in the study. Helena left. I texted back. Good. Are you okay? I thought about the question for a long time before answering. I don't know yet, but I will be. The next morning, I checked into a motel near Sedona. I needed distance. I needed silence. I needed to figure out who I was now that I wasn't Richard Yazzie wife anymore. For 3 days, I didn't talk to anyone. I hiked the Red Rock, ate alone at small diners, slept 12 hours a night. I let myself grieve, not for my marriage, which had been dead for years, but for the woman I'd been. The woman who trusted too easily, loved too blindly, gave too much to people who didn't deserve it. That woman was gone now. I didn't know who would take her place, but I was ready to find out. On the 4th day, my phone rang. Marcus. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom? His voice was raw, like he'd been crying. Mom, are you there? I'm here. I need to see you. Please. I need to. He broke off. I heard him take a shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. I closed my eyes. 27 years of loving this boy. 27 years of sacrifice and devotion and hoping he would grow into a good man. And then 3 weeks of watching him choose his father over me without a second thought. Where are you? I asked. Phoenix. At the house. That's another shaky breath. Something happened, Mom, after you left. What happened? Daniel and I talked for hours. He told me everything. About Rosa, about the money, about how Dad promised to acknowledge him and then kept making excuses. Marcus's voice cracked. He's my brother, Mom. I have a brother. And Dad hid him from me for 26 years. I know. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Would you have believed me? Silence on the other end. We both knew the answer. After Daniel left, Marcus continued, I confronted Dad. I showed him the documents you left on the table. The forged signatures, the hidden accounts, all of it. I asked him if it was true. What did he say? He said you were lying, that you'd fabricated everything to destroy him, that you were a bitter, vindictive woman who couldn't accept that he'd moved on. Marcus laughed bitterly. The same things he's been saying about you for weeks, but this time I didn't believe him. What changed? I looked at the signatures, Mom, the ones on the transfer documents, and I compared them to your real signature, the one on my birth certificate, the one on every birthday card you ever gave me. His voice dropped to a whisper. They weren't even close. Anyone could see they were forged. I never looked before. I never wanted to see. I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been wound tight for weeks, months, years. What happened then? I told Dad I knew he was lying. I told him I'd seen the evidence, talked to Daniel, understood what he'd done, and I told him, Marcus's voice broke completely. I told him I was done, that I couldn't be his son anymore, not like this, not after everything. Marcus. He went crazy, Mom. Started screaming about how I was betraying him, how you turned me against him, how everyone was conspiring to destroy him, and then he just stopped. He grabbed his chest and fell down, and he wasn't moving, and I didn't know what to do. Richard had a heart attack? They took him to St. Joseph's. He's alive, but it was felt bad. The doctors said if I hadn't called 911 when I did. Marcus trailed off. Helena came to the hospital. She tried to take charge, started talking about power of attorney and medical decisions, but I told her to leave. I told her she wasn't family, not anymore. I thought about Helena, my sister, who had conspired with my husband for years, who had stolen from me, lied to me, helped destroy my marriage. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied that she'd been thrown out, but mostly I just felt tired. How is Richard now? Stable. They're keeping him for observation. He'll probably need surgery. Marcus paused. He's been asking for you. No, Mom. No, Marcus. I spent 28 years taking care of that man, cooking his meals, cleaning his house, raising his son, forgiving his lies. I'm done. Whatever happens to Richard now, it's not my responsibility. Silence. Then quietly, I understand. Do you? I think so. I think he started again. I think I've been so afraid of losing Dad's approval that I never let myself see who he really was. And when you tried to show me, I blamed you instead of him, because blaming you was easier than admitting my father was a monster. I sat down on the edge of the motel bed. Outside, the sun was setting over the red rocks, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He's not a monster, Marcus. He's just a man who made terrible choices and never had to face the consequences until now. Will you come back to Phoenix? Eventually. I have things to take care of. The divorce, the house, the legal issues with the forged documents. I paused. But I'm not coming back for Richard, and I'm not coming back to be the person I was before. Who are you coming back as? I looked at my reflection in the motel mirror. A 52-year-old woman with grey in her hair and lines around her eyes. A woman who had lost everything and survived. A woman who was just beginning to figure out what she wanted. Someone new, I said. Someone I haven't met yet. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Grace Talchi, who Edward had recommended, said the case was one of the strongest she'd ever seen. Forged signatures, hidden assets, decades of financial fraud. Richard's lawyers tried to negotiate, but Grace wasn't interested in negotiating. He stole from you for 28 years, she said. We're not settling for anything less than everything. The house went back to me. The hidden accounts were frozen pending investigation. The pension contributions Richard had redirected were traced and recovered. By the time the dust settled, I had more money than I'd ever had in my life, and Richard had almost nothing. His company fired him when the fraud came to light, not because they cared about what he'd done to me, but because forging documents was a liability they couldn't afford. He lost his pension, his reputation, his fancy office with the view of the mountains. Helena tried to sue me for emotional distress. The case was thrown out in a week. Last I heard, she'd moved to California to live with a cousin. We haven't spoken since Thanksgiving, and I don't expect we ever will, but the thing I think about most isn't the money, or the house, or the legal victories. It's the night Marcus came to my new apartment, a small place downtown, nothing fancy, but mine, and handed me something wrapped in tissue paper. I found this in Dad's study, he said. In the drawer, the one you talked about. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a photograph, old and faded, of me and Richard on our wedding day. We were young, smiling, full of hope for the future. I barely recognized either of us, but that wasn't what made me catch my breath. Underneath the photograph was a birthday card, construction paper and glitter glue, faded from red to dusty pink, the one I'd made for Richard's 30th birthday 25 years ago. He kept it, Marcus said quietly. All these years. He never opened it, but he kept it. I turned the card over in my hands. The envelope was still sealed, the glitter still catching the light. 25 years of love compressed into a piece of paper that was never read. Why? I whispered. I don't know. Marcus sat down beside me. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. Maybe some part of him knew what he'd lost. He put his arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry, Mom, for not seeing it sooner, for choosing him over you, for all of it. I leaned into my son's embrace. My boy, who had finally become the man I'd always hoped he would be. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Richard recovered from his heart attack. He's living in a small apartment now, on the other side of Phoenix. Daniel visits him sometimes, not out of love, I think, but out of curiosity. A son trying to understand the father who abandoned him. Marcus and Daniel have become close. They meet for dinner every week, text each other constantly, share the bond that Richard tried to deny them for 26 years. It's strange, watching my son build a relationship with a brother he never knew he had, but it's also beautiful. Last week, Ethan asked me why Grandpa Richard doesn't come to family dinners anymore. I told him that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have consequences. He seemed to accept that, in the way children do. Sarah has been kinder to me lately. I think Marcus told her everything. She hugged me at Ethan's school play last month. Really hugged me. Not the polite air kiss she used to give. It felt like a beginning. And me, I'm learning to be alone. Not lonely. There's a difference. I have friends now. Real friends. Not the society wives Richard used to make me socialize with. I joined a book club. I started volunteering at a women's shelter. I'm taking a pottery class, of all things, and I'm terrible at it, but I love the feeling of clay between my fingers. Some nights, I take out that birthday card and look at it. I still haven't opened it. Part of me wants to know what I wrote 25 years ago, what hopes and dreams I poured into those handmade pages. But another part of me thinks some things are better left sealed. The past is the past. I can't change it. I can only decide what to do with the future. And for the first time in 28 years, that future is mine to choose. If you're reading this, maybe you're going through something similar. Maybe you're married to a Richard, or related to a Helena, or you've been lied to for so long you've forgotten what the truth looks like. I want you to know. It gets better, not easier. Better. You'll lose things you thought you couldn't live without, and you'll discover you can live without them just fine. You'll find strength you didn't know you had. You'll build a new life, piece by piece, from the rubble of the old one. And someday, you'll wake up in an apartment that's yours, drink coffee from a mug you chose yourself, and realize that you're happy. Not because everything worked out perfectly, but because you survived. Because you're free. That's my story. It's not a fairy tale, and it doesn't have a neat ending. Richard is still out there. Helena is still out there. The wounds are still healing, but I'm still here too, and I'm not going anywhere. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved to save yourself? Leave a comment below, or if you have your own story to share, send it to our channel. You never know who might need to hear it.